This episode is brought to you by Pixel 2 Editions, a full-service fine art printing company. More about them later. Hello and welcome to In the Art Scene podcast, a place where creatives share their stories. My name is Galina Marquez, and I have another cool story prepared for you today, so let's get to it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to In the Art Scene podcast. I am with Simon Bull today. And if you don't know who Simon Bull is, let me read very quickly from his website. Simon is the 2019 official artist for the National Cherry Blossom Festival in Washington, D.C., was official artist to boxing legend Muhammad Ali, and the official artist of 2002 Winter Olympics. How about that? So there's more on the website that I can be reading, but you know what? I don't want to overwhelm our listeners, and I actually want to give you a chance to talk about some other things. I was impressed, really. So first, when I saw your art and your process, which I also want to talk about, and then going to your website and listing all those things, the prizes, the honors, and everything, like. That's pretty big fish on my podcast. So why wouldn't you introduce yourself properly?
Well, thank you for asking me onto this podcast, Galina. I've been an artist for many years. I jokingly say to people that I've never been able to get a real job, so I had to stay painting. But I'm getting a little bit long in the tooth now because I've been doing this professionally since 1976, which is probably a little bit before the time of most of your listeners, I would think. But so I basically, experienced the art business from the inside out in many different seasons and different aspects. I've worked with some of the largest art companies in the world. I've worked on my own. I've worked with teams of assistants. I've worked with salespeople, business people, licensing people, but through it all, I've, survived and thrived. And I'm 64 today and going strong.
Awesome. Well, for sure, we don't want you to stop.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk a little bit about your process. And I have seen other artists making attempts like you with the flows and the drips and the pendulums and everything. But the way you do it kind of suggests that. So the way I have seen other artists are doing that, and I'm not going to name any names, is more for the sake of performance, because that's really cool to see the pendulum with paint dripping. The way you do it suggests that there is more to it. There's actually the idea, there's actually understanding of how the paint is going to emerge and the designs that are going to appear. And I know that you work a lot with color and you understand color very deeply. So I would really love for you to describe the way you do it and the meaning and your ideas behind it.
Well, I think the best way to answer that question is to give you a little bit of background, because people go on Instagram and they go crazy seeing the things that I'm doing. And some people love it, and some people hate it, and some people are confused. And I think that it's because what I'm showing is just a very small part of a bigger process. And I've come to an understanding of the materials and of my method and of my ideas over many years and through, tens of thousands of artworks. So I started out, I think the first 15 years of my career, I was doing watercolors and printmaking, because I basically, when I left art college, I left Leeds Polytechnic College of Art in England in 1980. And I had a decision to make about what I was going to paint, in terms of from a business perspective, not what I was going to paint, but how I was going to structure my business deal. And in the late 70s and early 80s, the UK was not particularly vibrant economically. My potential customers and myself were quite poor. We didn't have lots of money. And I figured, although I'd been enjoying doing oil paintings at college, I thought, well, if I did oil paintings, I'd have to, sell them. They'd take quite a while. I'd have to sell them for, £500 each in those days, which was, I thought, too much for the people that I knew. I mean, we're talking about the 70s, right? The early 80s. That would be a lot higher number now, right?
Yeah.
But I figured that if I did watercolors, they would take me less time, and my potential clients might be able to afford them. So uh, maybe it's crazy logic, but I started out that way doing watercolors. I did watercolors for 15 years, but I sold everything I produced. But I also started doing printmaking, which was a big passion of mine, and um, and gradually I developed some very unique forms of printmaking in my studio in the UK, and I became very successful in that. Became the number one selling artist in the UK by the year 2000, and that got me a lot of attention in the US. And so I eventually moved over to the US, but um, I started painting in acrylics again, oils and acrylics in about 1997. And of course, that was all work with brushes, canvases, brushes. At that particular stage, I was with my etchings, I was doing a hand coloring of the etchings with a particular kind of ink, which was called FW ink, Winsor Newton FW inks. And that was like a kind of a new product, back in the 90s, in the mid 90s, early 90s, because all of a sudden you didn't just have to squeeze paint from a tube. You could have paint coming from a bottle, it was like an ink, but it wasn't ink, it was pigmented, high flow, if you like. And you had to shake it, and pour it out. And so that was something I used a lot, but I was still basically stuck in what you might describe as traditional materials. But then over time, as I developed my painting technique, I then brought printmaking techniques back into my painting, and I would put wet canvases against one another and pull them apart and use that as the basis for new paintings. So I'd paint a painting on one surface and stick canvases against it, and I'd get 10 paintings off the one painting. Because
Yeah.
by that time, I was selling my artwork on cruise ships, and we were selling a lot of it. So I had to kind of increase my production. But during that time, various acrylic paint manufacturers, including Golden, came out with fluid acrylics. And so I started using the fluid acrylics. And it was the time when the whole kind of, fluid art, that whole kind of thing
Yeah, the
started.
acrylic flows. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of started going in that direction a little bit because I just started to really love the fact that the paint could have a life of its own, because when it's just a blob of paint squeezed from a tube, it just sits there. It doesn't do anything unless you do anything with it. But I became super excited about how the paint flowed. And I use fluid acrylics, but I also use high flow acrylic.
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes use them in combination. I do like the way that, high flow as acrylic is a sort of like a development of the original FW ink kind of a formula. But today, I like to work with my materials as sort of like almost like a kind of a living kind of a thing, so that the paint becomes an extension of your bodily movements. And, you kind of spend your time watching paint move and then gently move it to the left and maybe let it drop to the right or whatever. So that's a long answer, but hopefully give your listeners a little bit of a background on some of the ways that artists today are able to do things that we weren't able to do when I was starting out in the art business, because the technology had not developed. Not only did I start before computers or iPhones or any of that stuff, I started before fluid acrylic.
Wow.
You could make your own by adding water to it, but that wasn't the same, right?
Well, that makes you sound very ancient.
Yeah. Well, even when I was younger, like when I was at college, acrylic paint was very low quality. It was very bad. A lot of the artists of the time, Lichtenstein, Pollock, all these people having major problems with their artworks today because they used household paint and they used poor quality materials, because the kind of quality materials we have available today, even though they're expensive, were not available.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to listen to you say how your art developed with the development of the available mediums. So it's really.
Absolutely.
Do you use any additives with your flow acrylics, like silicone drops or anything? You know,
No,
you know
I
how some painters are playing with the cells and everything like
the
this.
cells.
Yeah,
I kind of tried that like a little bit, but the thing is that put it bluntly, my work is expensive, and I need to be able to guarantee that when somebody buys one of my paintings, they're buying something which will not fade, crack, or disintegrate over time. And so I only use very expensive, high quality paints, and I don't mix them with, you know, the all those kind of. I don't use Floetrol.
Floetrol. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't use Floetrol. I bought some and tried it, obviously, and I forget even the name of the silicon. What is it? I tried some of that, but I just don't trust it. Like, it creates a fabulous effect, and I'm not saying it doesn't, but I'm not sure what that would look like in 30 years' time.
yeah, understandable. Um, I got an answer. I got a question while listening to you. When you started, you kind of jumped off college directly into the question, how do I make my art career financially successful? So was that always your motivation, and how did that play? Or I mean, I heard you say that printmaking was your passion, which you were able to turn into a very successful financially part of your business. But walk me through your thought process, because I know even today, a lot of artists who are graduating with art degree complain that business mindset is not taught in the universities. Nothing of what you need to do to be financially successful and, bring the food to the table with your art is being taught right now in the universities. So it's kind of
Well,
a
this
pain.
is a great, fabulous subject, and I I can bring this right up to date. I just went on a painting trip, a plein air painting trip to Crater Lake, and people can follow that on my Instagram. But while I was painting there, I met an art professor from art school in the Midwest, and he was saying how he'd loved teaching, but he'd really enjoyed his art practice, and he'd been selling his work in galleries around the country and was getting good prices for his work. And he was really feeling that it was getting time for him to sort of launch out and leave his teaching career behind and become a professional, like a full-on artist. And so I said to him, I said that sounds really good. You're getting good prices for your work. You're getting a lot of distribution. You're in galleries. Let me ask you, how long? I said, how much do you get for one of your paintings? And he said, well, $20,000. And I said, that's really good. I said, how long does it take you to paint one? He said, well, about 4 months.
Hmm.
Well, that's if you take 4 plus 4 is 8 plus 4 is 12. That's $60,000 a year if you sell them all, right? And I said, you know what? The math doesn't work out, because the thing is, you just can't paint fast enough. So unless you can figure out how to paint, you need to change the algorithm of your process. You're not going to be successful. And I said that what you're doing is you're painting to impress. You know what you want, and a lot of artists fall into this trap. And I fell into this trap for many years when I was younger, painting to show how good of an artist you are. You can make that portrait look so much like a portrait. It looks like someone's face. The lighting is amazing. The brushwork is superb. The amount of time it took is obviously amazing. And although that may impress art students or other artists, or people may say, "Wow, it's really great," it doesn't. It doesn't impress non-artists. It's not what non-artists are looking for. Non-artists that are your buyers don't care about your technique. They don't care about your education. They don't care about how long it took you. They don't care about the thought process. They only care about what it does for them, whether they like it, whether it speaks to them, whether it is connected to some kind of memory of theirs, or whether it's would make a nice gift or would look great on their wall. They're only thinking about themselves. And so for a lot of artists, that's why I mentioned that when I was younger, I had to decide between oil painting or watercolor, because I had to make a certain amount per week and I had to try and find a market for my product. And so I figured if I could do a watercolor a day and sell it for $100, I could make $500 a week. And in those days, that would have been $2,000 a month, whatever. Not enough, but it would have been just about enough to kind of scrape by. And it was like a simple formula. And a lot of artists don't even have a formula like that. They're like, well, I painted a picture and hopefully somebody will buy it. It's like, no, if you don't have a plan, then nobody, you can't make it. So if you're the art professor that is selling work for $20,000 and it's taking 4 months, like how about if you did one a week and sold it for $20,000? Now you're in business.
Well, it sounds fantastic. So how did you come up with was it all your own kind of understanding how market works, or did you take additional business classes? Or because I speak with a lot of artists, and being an artist myself, this is not the train of thought that you normally meet talking to other, like it's more like a professor that you are describing. So how did you come up with it?
Well, first of all, I didn't have a clue about business. I never went to business school. I was bad at math at school. I just enjoyed wandering around, painting pictures and having fun. But one of the teachers at my school, when I was 17, 18, 16, 17, 18, they started putting in offers for my artwork. And one teacher offered me $13 for a painting, and I just didn't think it was enough. So I said, well, I'd take 15. And so I accepted the offer, and that was one of my first major sales, as it were. And I sort of been kind of keeping up with demand ever since. But I had to have a practical approach to. I was creating content, as it were, but I had to have people to show it to. A potential market. I had to go to shows, and I started doing shows, but I had to be able to present my work that was, affordable to my target audience, but also made sense to me because, like I said, if I could paint one painting a week and get $100 for it, that's not as good as painting a painting a day and getting $100 for it. So I had to do very simple formulas to figure out whether it was viable, because I had a family to raise, I had bills to pay like everybody else. So I kind of made it up as I went along.
Well, you obviously succeeded.
Well, I've done it. I know what I'm talking about now because I've done it for almost 50 years.
When did you start getting sense that you know what you're talking about, along the way?
It takes a long time to figure out that you can know what you're talking about, but you have to go there and do it. You have to walk those roads,
So, and what were your subjects? Because we're having very nice kind of a business conversation right now. What makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Watercolor make more sense because you can produce more of them. You obviously have a demand for it. So, was it ever a question for you if you were compromising the art that you want to create versus the art that is going to sell, or was it never a question for you?
Well, first of all, it's impossible to paint art that sells. That's impossible to do. If you try to paint art that sells, it's not authentic. Nobody likes it. You don't know what they want. It's not a formula. It's not a kind of an idea. It's not a concept that works. For me, the artwork that sells is something that I really enjoy doing and I have a passion for. I just don't even think about what sells or what doesn't sell. I never think about that. I just enjoy doing what I'm doing. But I do respond intelligently to feedback. So let's say I painted a yellow flower, a blue flower, and a red flower, and I took them to a show. And the red flower sold straight away, and I got orders to 2 more. The yellow flower I sold one of, and the blue flower didn't sell. You could say, well, okay, paint more red flowers, okay? But then the thing is, then if all you're painting is red flowers, then you're not doing what you want to do. And then people have bought all the red flowers that they want to do. And then you just kind of become boring, That's not how it works either. But you do, you see, what a lot of artists, young artists, don't seem to understand so much is the fact that the purpose of being an artist is to sort of engage in a kind of a romance or a dance with your audience. You're talking to them through paint, and they're either ignoring you or they're getting excited. And if they get excited or they engage with it, then you realize that you're speaking their kind of language. And so therefore you formulate what you're saying in order to speak to them more powerfully, rather than saying, oh, well, this particular style, nobody's interested in it, nobody's listening to this, nobody's looking at it. Let's do more of that. Let's do more of the things that nobody's interested in. I mean, nobody ever succeeded with that kind of an approach. And so you have to have this two-way kind of mindset from the beginning. You have to start your art career with your customer in mind, because the customer is the person you're trying to reach. The art is just a means of reaching them. It's not about the art. It's about what goes from your inner being to their inner being. The art is the medium that conveys that emotion or that thought or that idea. And so, yeah.
Well, that's interesting. And I'm trying to think whether I have ever thought about it this way or not, because I switched careers like completely in a different way, went from marketing to art. And for the longest time, couldn't figure out how to marry two together, because to me it always felt like I'm either sacrificing one or another. But yeah, I see the point that the art is the mean of communications, which the marketing is pretty much the same thing. It's the mean of communications with your audience. So they can go along pretty well.
Oh, yeah. Well, the marketing is how you take your message to your customer,
and the art is the message.
But it's not necessarily, it's not the message itself. It's just a means. But the message is embedded in the art. But it's a spiritual, it's an invisible thing. The message behind the art is something in the realm of feelings or emotions or thoughts. It's not an actual thing,
So what is the message behind your art?
Oh, the message behind my art is very simple, really. It is enjoy, that life is a positive, beautiful thing. I started painting flowers many years ago, and the story of the flower is basically the story of the cycles of life. But the entire cycle of life is designed to teach us about the importance of struggling through life to come to a successful conclusion, that we're all growing up into God's presence. We're all going home. We're driving. The flowers all move up to the light. All movement is away from the earth towards the heavens. And so even though you don't say it like that, you paint a flower maybe open to the sun, open to the light. The light comes down from above. And so my artwork, really, what I'm trying to do is I'm opening a window for my viewers to step into and beyond, so that if ever you've read, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, C.S. Lewis, the idea that the child Lucy found a wardrobe and went through it and found another world, the other side of the wardrobe. But she was able to then come back to London, and, there were these two parallel worlds. And the purpose of a painting is to take someone to another world, because life travels very quickly. Life moves too fast for us to be able to understand it. We're living in the present moment, but art slows life down sufficiently to help us analyze or understand it a little bit more. And so the purpose of a painting is to take someone to another place, call it escapism. But then in that other world, it's a parallel to this world, and then we can come back to this world with a refreshed, renewed vision. And different kinds of art do it differently. Music takes people there emotionally, like while they're listening to it. A painting lives on a person's wall, and it's like it just takes them there when they're looking at it. Like a movie takes you there, when you're watching it. All these things can play in your memory. So I think the idea is to refresh a soul on its journey into the eternal. That's the point, really. That's what it's about.
That's a great point.
Something like that.
But it's very poetic anyway. So, um, so you're creating your art with that idea in mind of that other world where you want to take your customer, your viewer.
Mm.
Does it actually reflect something in your emotional world that is going on, like in the moment? I see that you're a very content person. I don't know if you tend to go through the swirls of emotions and then art it out. Uh, is it like you kind of arrived to the place and now you're taking your viewers with you, or does it change with seasons?
Well, every painting has to tell a story of conflict and, the struggle between light and dark. There's, but the point is that light triumphs over the dark. And even when there are times when it appears that the darkness wins, that's just a prelude to the light breaking through again. So a lot of the recent paintings that I've been doing on Instagram, for example, the first one I did, I called "We're Happy Now," because my wife has incurable cancer, and she went into her first round of remission, which was very good. And so I felt quite optimistic about that, about the world at that point, even though I knew the kind of remission that she has with this sort of cancer is only temporary. It was still a good thing. And so I started painting. I started a new series, like, was more yellows, oranges, pinks, reds, blues, sort of like primary colors and so on. And that seemed to take off on Instagram. It's been kind of like occupying me a little bit since. But yeah, I do express my emotions through my work, but not often in a conscious way, kind of thing. Although I don't know, I think I do very consciously. Like when my wife was first diagnosed, I painted a lot of high flow paintings of skies, of clouds. I was thinking of heaven and things like that, and I was thinking of eternity. And so then I started like painting pictures of that kind of idea, So yeah, it's I think you have to be honest with yourself, why you're painting stuff or what's coming to mind. Although you can paint, if someone commissions you to paint a picture, you can just paint a picture. You don't have to have any kind of emotional engagement, You're trying to work with what the customer wants, right? But if you're just doing your own thing, you kind of go in the flow kind of thing,
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing such vulnerable information about your personal life. Hey, In the Art Scene listeners. Do you remember Mark O'Donnell from Pixel 2 Editions? He's been on the show in Season 3, Episode 7, and told us everything we need to know about giclée printing. And take my word for it, Mark and his team are the best in Southern California and beyond. I've been a client of Pixel 2 Editions since 2019, and I've been shouting about them from the rooftops ever since. Luckily, I don't have to do it anymore because I have a podcast. Despite being San Diego local, Mark and his team are working with some of the best photographers and artists from all states, including Clark Little and Kadir Nelson. And frankly, if you are a photographer or a digital artist, you don't need to be local to work with Pixel 2 Editions. Just use a file upload on their website for your heavy images and write down the specs. They can print small proofs for you on any substrate you want and ship them to you for free. And for my listeners, they offer a free 8x10 full image proof on metal. Just tell them that you heard about them on the podcast and they will take care of you. Let me tell you, their metal prints are amazing. Whenever I order mine, they fly off the shelves in no time. So I highly recommend you try it out. And oh, did I mention that they are a full service company? It means that they do everything from color correcting and printing to framing and shipping directly to you or your clients. So don't wait, go to pixel2editions.com, 2 is a number, and editions is plural, or call 858-549-7299. Again, pixel2editions.com, 2 is a number, and editions is plural, or call 858-549-7299. Say hi for me. really hope that the remission is going to be, long enough and not the last one. And hope that she and you are going to enjoy more and more years together. But on the other hand, having such a diagnosis puts the person and their loved ones on the path of sort of grieving that should lead you to the acceptance of inevitable conclusion of the journey. So would you say that your art is the way of going through that process? And where are you, like, on which stage are you? You don't have to answer if that's too much.
I think that I think I do express it through my art, definitely, absolutely. As I've just mentioned. So, what stage am I at in the process? I would say, well, at the beginning of this process, I prayed about this, and I felt that the attitude of my heart should be one of surrender. And so I've been living into that because I feel it's the most powerful form of healing. Because there's no point fighting it. We hear, people say, "Well, we're fighting this thing," and we understand that to go through all the treatments. And my wife's going through all the treatments. That's a form of fighting it, but at the same time, you want to. God has a wonderful plan for our life, and God can heal people just like that. And I believe, that people get healed. I myself am a cancer survivor. I was healed of cancer 17 years ago. I had successful surgery.
Wow.
But at the same time, there are certain kinds of conditions that we have because we're all, as I say, nobody gets out of here alive. And we are on a journey into the eternal, into God's presence. And so I really speak about that in my work in an indirect way. I'm not a preacher in that sense. I don't like write books about it. Oh, actually, I did write a book about it. What am I talking about? But I think that many of us struggle with things that we find, whether they be injustices in the world or injustices in our own life or things that we feel are wrong that we, wish didn't happen. And by fighting them, we actually make the problem worse. And I think if we find a place of surrender, we find that we're able to find all of a sudden that the solution kind of appears before us. And that attitude of heart is something that I manifest in my painting technique, in that I come to the edge of the canvas and prepared, but at the same time, there's a moment when I just have to let the paint go. And so the paint just flows and it's controlled, but it's not controllable. It's surrendered, I let it go on its journey. And I feel that the flow painting is in a way a metaphor for my own state of mind in this season of my life, in that I feel that every day I come to the edge of the canvas and it's my job to lean into that but then I let it go. You know what I'm saying? And it just kind of gravity takes over and it is what it is, And for some bizarre reason, it seems to have spoken to millions of people, on Instagram. And somebody yesterday said, "Oh, my anxiety level went from a 10 to a 2 in 30 seconds just watching this." And then other people chimed in on the comment saying, "Me too, like me too," And I think it's because I don't fight it, which is not that I don't stand against sickness or injustice, or of course not, but I try to find a different path through it all. It's like a saying in a way. Is religion is a lot of people think that religion is the art. It's like almost like religion is the art of changing other people, whereas true faith is the art of changing yourself. And often we find ourselves in a world where we're all trying very hard to change other people when God has given us the tools to accept our own inner transformation and be changed ourselves. Because the work is to change ourselves, and then the world will change because we've been changed. But we try to change the world because then we hope if the world gets better, then we'll get better. but it actually works the other way around.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. There was something that you said that kind of struck me, that you let the pain live its own life. You let it go. You surrender. So I just wanted to make a comment about that, because I see more and more artists who are trying the flow acrylics, especially with all the effects and cells and everything. What they are doing, they are trying to control it. So there are more techniques of directing the paint, or getting the special effects that you need. And there are some people who are even purposefully making it look like flowers or butterflies in the way they create the composition. They don't let the paint flow and live its own life. They are directing that life. And you're doing exactly the opposite. So I think that's why what you are doing stands out to people, and people see it on Instagram. Which actually I wanted also to ask you. You mentioned Instagram a few times. Apparently, it's a significant part of your process or your marketing. So, how long have you been on Instagram, and how many followers do you have? Yeah,
I've been on Instagram about 10 years probably, but I
pretty much from the beginning.
yeah. But I never did anything with it. Like I'd post a couple of pictures here and there. And I think, in the beginning of May, after having been on it for almost 10 years, I had 5,000 followers, and I didn't really pay much attention to it. And then I posted a reel of my wife walking. We went on a hike, and she was walking through, and there was like I got a audio of Elon Musk or someone talking, and it went to 50,000 views, which I mean, I'd never got more than like 1,000 views on anything, and so it got me thinking, and so I thought it would be fun to sort of show videos of not just of paintings, but of the process, So I started, I put a couple of videos up, and they just they went nuts. One of them went to 100, got 30 million views.
Wow.
Like my daughter, who's 23, and her friends were down the weekend that it started, that my Instagram took off, and I was like talking to them, and then I'd getting distracted, say, hang on, so I'm sending something to my Instagram, and then they jumped on it, and I did a video reel with them in it, which has now had 2 million views, and and we were all like, what's happening on Instagram? It was like crazy, right? And then so we didn't know what was happening, and then so I started doing more reels, and so I've done about, that was at the end of May, and I've done about 3 reels a day since then. And, we've had coming on to 150 million views since the end of May. So it's been interesting. But also from a creative perspective, it's been pretty fun because, I was creating artworks for my galleries. And now I've got like a more of an online presence. So I can kind of show the process more, and I don't know. It's just it's been really interesting because, like I said at the beginning, like I'm not wanting to emphasize my age, but as an artist selling to wealthy clients, I don't really get that much connection with the younger generations. And now when I've got like millions of 24-year-olds in India and Brazil and Argentina following me, it's like it's different, and it's good for me to wake up a little bit and find out who some of these musicians are that people are listening to today. So I've almost become like a little kind of visual DJ, It's kind of funny.
It is funny. It is really funny. But three reels a day, like it sounds overwhelming to me. How it doesn't interfere with your art practice?
Well, the thing is that got to understand that an Instagram reel is a work of art.
In a way. I mean, so I know people who would argue with you.
Well, the thing is, my Instagram posts were promotional. They were about me, they were about my art, and so on. And it goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning about how many watercolors or how many oil paintings should I get? How could I reach my audience? I'd always tried to figure out how I could reach my audience. And the thing is that, and I'm emphasizing this because I think it's important for your listeners to try to understand, your audience doesn't care about you, they care about themselves. And the thing is that you may be saying, look, I'm a great artist, I painted a great picture, look at it. They may or may not be interested in that thing, okay? But if you create something that for, say, 10, 15, 20 seconds, they're going to look at, that packs the punch of a full-on hour-and-a-half movie in 20 seconds and calms their spirit or energizes them or gets them going or inspires them, that is a work of art right there, just like a movie is a work of art. Whereas if it's promotional, it's not a work of art. And so the shift that I made at the beginning of my Instagram going viral was I shifted away from talking about myself. And see now, because one of the features, I don't really say anything on any of these videos. I'm just like directing the paint or whatever. And it's just like a kind of a small moment in the process, not necessarily the whole process, And I, it's just I'm speaking to my audience, and so I create my artwork. So the artworks I work on during the day, and then I have my team following me around with an iPhone, but then I just like pull out key moments of the process at any particular kind of moment that were maybe interesting or not, and then blend it with a saying or with some music, and it kind of becomes a reel. And then so it's not an interference in the process, and it's not just performance for Instagram in that sense. It's a new form of artwork. It's not new. It's like it's a movie. It's whatever. But it's TikTok or Instagram Reels. These kinds of platforms give artists an opportunity of connecting with their audience in exciting new ways. But you have to give them something which they're excited to consume. And it's different from the days when you'd have an exhibition and put it on the walls of a gallery, and people would come around and have a cocktail and maybe buy it and take it home. That happens, of course, but that happens in the brick and mortar world. But on the online world, people are scrolling, they don't really care, and then they see something that, we've all followed that guy down a mountainside on his skateboard waiting for him to die, but he never dies. You know what I'm saying? We're all like waiting for that to happen. And the same with, when people see the process, people are sort of waiting for something to go wrong. Like, they're like, what's happening now? And you build anticipation, And so, yeah, it's that's it, really.
I think this is a great suggestion for many artists today, like the way to shift their mindset about social media, because there's a lot of frustration that I hear, and I am kind of trying to keep on top of it because of my marketing background. I'm still interested, and I'm still doing a little bit of that on the side. I know that a lot of content creators on Instagram are unhappy with the new changes and how fast the algorithm is evolving. And I knew that a lot of creative people, like us, like artists, creative people, they are really frustrated because before that, Instagram was really about sharing images, and that was the end of it. That's like, you create an image, you share the image, and that was about it. Now it's very demanding and it's constantly changing. Yeah. So
if you share images now, nobody cares. The algorithm doesn't respect that at all anymore. It's moved on to a TikTok kind of a formula, and you have to sort of like, it's like we're all working for Instagram now. We're all working for TikTok. But at the same time, the algorithm can be very kind to you if you understand what the algorithm is trying to create. The algorithm is trying to engage users with cool content. I mean, so the pressure on an artist literally is to create cool content. And I say to people, it's like, well, you watch all these YouTube videos about how to do how to succeed on Instagram or whatever. And I'm like, well, I say to people, well, because you were saying three reels a day sounds very daunting. And I said, well, not if you love it, not if you're excited to do it, not if you
True.
wake up, oh my gosh, what can I do today? What's on the agenda? What, let's get some reels going here. If it's something you love, then it's not like a job, It's like, that's why I say, if I was doing reels like to promote my artwork, that would be like a real pain. I'd probably hire somebody to do it. But because it's a form of art in its own right, and I can speak kind of like I get up on my bike in the morning and I go to the coffee shop and I release my reels. So it's like I say, it's like I come to the edge of the precipice, like on the edge of the canvas. I let the paint flow. I go and I like hit send, right? Share, and boom, like out it goes, right? And then I take a few more sips of my coffee and refresh and see and I'm like, see if it's going to work or not. And it's like, oh yeah, 1,400 views like in the first 5 minutes. Okay, yeah, we're going to be good. We're going to be good. And the next one I did, I was like only 600. And ooh, I have to watch what happens here. And that's how it works. But it's a thing.
So it's practically another medium for you that you're playing with.
It's a total medium. But what's so great is that it's got a live audience. You can let the reel go into the real world, and everybody's watching it. Like it's like happening now. It's on the bleeding edge of reality, and people are like liking it, commenting it, sending in hate mail, saying you're not an artist, get off Instagram, and you get everything going all at the same time, all the love, all the hate, and you just like you're like a DJ, like, whoop, 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 like spinning this a little bit, slowing that one down, and it's you're sitting at the console, and it's pretty fun.
Well, I have another question for you, because I get what you're saying, and it's great when it works for you naturally like that. But what do you say to artists who are experiencing an imposter syndrome? Because that's number one block for many of them to go in front of camera and film themselves and share it with millions of people. So I would argue that a lot of them are just, afraid that millions of people are going to see that. So, and what do you say about imposter syndrome in general? Have you ever experienced that, and how to deal with it, regardless of Instagram?
I started the first 15 years of my career. Okay, I'd been making a reasonably decent living as an artist. I had a team of about 12 people working for me. I had a gallery, but I still couldn't really, deep down, like in an emotional sense, admit that I was an artist. What I mean by that, I would see these photos of Picasso in his studio, you know what I mean? And I'd think, oh my gosh, that's an artist, I'd look at all the masters, all the current people in my day that were very successful, David Hockney, Lichtenstein, Mark Rothko. These were artists, these are proper gallery shows in New York, in London. And I was just like a kid, like messing around with paint, trying to sell my work at the local thrift store or whatever. Or, well, by then I had a gallery or whatever. But the point is that it's honestly, it's a challenging, unless you've got some kind of like massively inflated ego. I think for young artists today to sort of stalk out and say, I'm an artist, it's like, no, I think it's something that honestly, it's okay to have imposter syndrome. That's a perfectly natural thing, because, there are famous artists out there, and who are you?
Yep. And with Instagram, there are way more real artists, and then there's you.
Well, exactly. It's like, and the thing is, and then you compare yourself, like, to this artist or that artist, and obviously compared to them, like, you're not really, it's like, but the thing is, you have to, this is a natural condition, but you have to find a way through it. You can't just stay there. Like, gradually over that 15 years, I started to own the fact that I was an artist, and I'm like, I wouldn't say I woke up one morning, but it was like a gradual thing. I'm like, I have to embrace this, and I have to lean into this. And many times in my career, I've changed my style. I've changed the way that I paint. I've changed my medium. I've changed, kind of like I'm a kind of chameleon, like I've changed different things, because what was successful in the 1980s, what people were buying, and then like in 1989, like they just stopped buying that kind of thing. And then in England, in the art market in the early 90s, nobody knew what to paint. And I came up with my brightly colored etchings that I invented, and it became incredibly successful because nobody else was doing it, you know? Um, and then when giclée was invented, nobody wanted etchings anymore because they were too expensive and they wanted a giclée. And then anybody could print a giclée, and everything changed all the time. And now it's Instagram, whatever. And so I think that the thing is that to deal with imposter syndrome, you have to embrace you have to embrace your own vision as an artist. You have to be able to say to yourself, I can do this. I I love painting. I really enjoy this image. I feel very strongly about it, and show it to people. I mean, like I say, if you keep on painting and there's not a soul interested, you should probably do something else, But, if you're doing it right, whatever that means, like I say, when I was a kid, I'd be painting and I'd be super excited about my painting. And then my teachers would come up and offer me money for it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I wasn't trying to do marketing. I mean, they just came to me and offered. Because the thing is, there has to be some kind of electricity, like in what you're doing. And people ask me all the time, how do you get started? How do you get started? And so I'm like, it's very simple. Show what you've got to your family and friends. Like, and if not a soul is interested, if your granny doesn't buy it, nobody's going to buy it. But if your granny and your uncle and your friend down the road buys it, maybe, you should put up a show in the entry to the local library or something. Maybe you should take out, I don't know, maybe you should take it to a gallery somewhere. Well, I'm talking about how it was in those days. Now, of course, put it on Instagram, whatever. And people whine all the time at Instagram about my prices. It's just hysterical because, I mean, we've been dealing with pricing in the bricks and mortar world. I mean, if you've not established a price for your work, start off at a couple $100. And if you're selling everything you've got at $200, make it $400. And if you're selling everything you've got at $400, make it $600. And then you get to $2,000 and you're only selling 20% of what you were doing, maybe bring it back to $1,500. So you just have to, that's the way it works,
Yes. Well, I'm consuming everything, Yeah, thank you so much. This episode is packed with wisdom, and ironically, I just yesterday had a conversation with a bunch of artists who were trying to figure out Instagram and social media and being frustrated by how things are working, and that you need to keep up with it and everything. And here we are today talking about shifting the mindset and enjoying what you're doing, whether it's Instagram or your own art, and treating it as a medium and just playing with it. So I think this is a very beautiful thing, and I'm a little bit frustrated that this episode is going to be on air like 3 months from now, because I feel like it's very it should be out now, but I have my own content scheduled.
No
problem. And I think this is a good time to wrap up, and we're at the top of the hour. I also wanted to ask you, tell our listeners how to find you, and obviously we will put all the links and references to where to find you in our show notes. And I didn't have a chance to ask you about the book. If you want to talk about the book, we actually can take a few more minutes. But I would like to put the link to that book in the show notes as well, so people can find it.
Sure. Well, my Instagram handle is Simon Bull Art. This is my name, Simon Bull, and then art on the end. And actually, that's the name of my website. That's my website as well. It's my YouTube handle as well. So Simon Bull Art pretty much covers it. And the book is actually available on Amazon. It's called Artist Drawn from Life, and it's a story. It's a memoir about all the artists and events in my life that inspired me in my art career.
Well, that would be a really inspirational read. So everybody who's listening, please check out the Amazon link in our show notes and make sure that you get the book.
The book is entirely pre-Instagram, well, pre-Instagram into the recent months. Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting read. I think so.
All right.
It's been a pleasure being online with you.
Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Well, you have any more wisdom for us?
Yes, I'll close with this. I think that, for your listeners, being an artist is a beautiful thing, okay? And you've been given a gift which you need to develop by whatever inspires you. Draw on what inspires you, and you're just a channel between the source of your inspiration and the destination for your inspiration. I describe myself as a chef for the retina, so your job is to prepare beautiful meals for people's eyes. And people will have different tastes. Some people prefer chicken, some people prefer fish. You can't control that. But if you make chicken dishes, there's enough people out there that like chicken. And so you just stick with that and you'll be good to go. Enjoy yourself and enjoy what you do, and all will be well.
Thank you so much for that. Simon, this is really truly a pleasure having you on our show. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being such a big part of the art scene, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you, Galina. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
It has been another episode of In the Art Scene podcast. If you liked today's conversation, please give us a good review on Apple and go listen to other great stories. Check out our website intheartscene.com or follow us on Instagram at intheartscene for more content. If you are a creative and you want to share your story, shoot us a message from the website or DM us on Instagram. Look forward to seeing you next time in the art scene.